Okay.
You see the international shipping port. You see where like the ferries and that kind of thing. And then it'll take you back around, you'll see the cadet ship where it's going on.
Right then, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, good afternoon. Welcome aboard the alley cat from the side of your harbour tour today. As we do depart from the historic dockyard, by law we do have to brief all on a very short safety announcement. Therefore, in a very unlikely event of an emergency, please do remain calm, remain seated, and await instructions from either myself or the crew. On board the vessel, life jackets can be found underneath the seats at the forward end of the saloon, as well as inside the life jacket box on both the front end and top deck. Instructions on how to don these can be found in various locations throughout the vessel. A life raft, they're kept up on the top deck. We have 2 self-inflating life rafts on either side of the wheelhouse. We also carry 3 orange free-floating life rafts on a Portsmouth water. These will be launched by a member of crew, and instructions on how to board them will also be given. Throughout the tour today, folks, feel free to move around a boat. Just please appreciate though, we're on a boat and therefore liable to sudden movements. With that in mind, we do kindly ask you do not stand upon any of the seats, lean too far over or climb upon the side railings, and for any young children on board, please ensure they do not run around the vessel. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we do back our way out to the historic dockyard, we're going to start our tour off by looking over on our right-hand side. That, of course, is by looking towards HMS Warrior. Now, Warrior herself was built back in 1859, but commissioned into the Royal Navy in 1860, which makes her part of our Victorian fleet. Now, back in the Victorian times, the Royal Navy was divided into 3 distinct sections. There was a Red Fleet, a White Fleet, and a Blue. Warrior was the flagship to the Red Fleet, the highest ranking of all 3. So it's deemed until this very day that she should still fly the iconic Red Ensign flag from above the captain's cabin. So, ladies and gents, we do go around the corner here on our right hand side. I'd like to welcome you all to Her Majesty's Naval Base Portsmouth. Otherwise known as HMS Nelson, today it plays home to about 64% of our Royal Naval Surface Fleet. Now, the first jetty of the naval base, that's this one here on the right, is called the South Railway Jetty. And it gets that term because it used to be as far south the railway line in Portsmouth used to extend to. That was all the way until many years ago, when the railway line that was here was completely removed, the only remaining part of that being the blue-fronted building off to our right, which is in fact the old waiting rooms. But obviously with the train line now gone, the jetty has instead come home to the large red brick building in the background, the one with the big white archway underneath it. The building itself, well, that is known as Semaphore Tower, and it plays home to arguably the most important people within the naval base, which is a group known as the Queen's Harbour Master, or QHM for short. These are the guys and girls that have total control of every single shipping movement in and around the harbour. That goes from the start of this tour right up to the movement of all the warships, crushing on ferries and Isle of Wight traffic. So as we do continue along, still looking off to our right, got a slight gap in the keywall, but beyond that we head across to what is known as Victory Jetty. This of course gets its name because of HMS Victory you'll see located in the background. Now today she is sat inside dry dock number 2. There she is lined with concrete and is in fact open to the public. And every year, well over 250,000 people will in fact roam round her and explore the various places whilst on board. So if you want, you can go look inside the captain's cabin of the stay, you can go and see where the crew's then work. You can even make your way onto the top deck to see the exact spot where Nelson was shot. nice and close to us. That's the Commodore Goodwill, run by Condor Ferries. She travels between here in Portsmouth and the Channel Islands to Guernsey or Jersey. She comes in pretty much every single day at 4 o'clock, so it's no surprise to see her going past at the moment as she makes her way to the top end of the harbour. That's why we're going quite slow at the moment. Just got to allow her to get through, and then we'll follow her up to the very top end of the base. So see, from where we are, get great glimpses of the Victory just inside the dry dock over on our right there. But about to come into view ahead of us is arguably the most important ship in the harbour. R08 is the first and lead ship of our Queen Elizabeth class of super aircraft carrier. This is HMS Queen Elizabeth herself. Now she is the largest warship ever built for the Royal Navy. That's because she weighs in at approximately 70,000 tonnes. It actually makes her 3 times the size of one of our previous Invincible class of carrier. So to be slightly more specific, she's 280 metres long, and at her widest point, that's from either edge of the flight deck, she is 17 metres, making her one of the widest ships anywhere in the world. Now the Queen Elizabeth had somewhat recently returned to the harbour. She came back into port about 2 to 3 weeks ago. But at the moment as you look at her, you'll realise there's quite a bit of work taking place to her. All the scaffolding here, there and everywhere, all the heavy machinery and the giant white tents. This is because they're preparing the ship to leave Portsmouth at the beginning of September, at which point she's due to head across to America, and there she will finish off her fixed wing trials. It's of course the process where they test and trial an aircraft. And in case you didn't know already, the aircraft that will eventually go on board are called the F-35B Lightning II jets. They've been chosen in particular because they have the ability to land and take off vertically. So all being well, those aircraft will go on by the end of the year, and she will be, by this time next year, on her main deployments. View one of the most iconic features, and of course it's the ski ramp. That's designed to help get those aircraft into the sky with a heavier payload of arms. A lot of people often wonder though, why do they need a ski ramp if the aircraft can take off vertically? This is a very valid point. The reason they use these vertical landing in aircraft and you have a ski ramp on board, firstly it's because when an aircraft takes off vertically it burns a lot of fuel. It's not really that practical. So whenever possible they would much rather take off like a conventional plane. However, when they then come into land, they have to land vertically because 280 metres isn't a very long runway. The Queen Elizabeth also is fitted with arrestor wires which stop the aircraft from falling off the edge of the carrier, so they have to land like a helicopter would, so they have these vertical landing aircraft before that reaches the load. So that's why they've gone for the F-35Bs. Obviously as well as when you come around the front, you get one of the best photo opportunities from here, straight down the bow of the ship. Try and get those flight decks nice and even spaced to either side. Always looks quite nice. So there we go, ladies and gents. That is the Queen Elizabeth, our £3.1 billion super aircraft carrier. So moving away from the Queen Elizabeth, coming into view now on our right. This here is P2T3 HMS Midway. Officially the newest warship in the Royal Navy. She only arrived about 2 to 3 months ago. But she's a brand new Batch 2 River class patrol ship, will eventually be taking over from the existing Batch 1s which are slowly being phased out of service, and hopefully by the end of the year she'll be involved in what is called fisheries protection. This means she'll go around UK waters ensuring all the fishermen adhere to the rules and regulations. Then behind her is D35, that is HMS Dragon. You'll see her sister ship D36, the Defender, ahead of us as well. Both these are Daring class Type 45 destroyers. Now, there are 6 of them in service for our Royal Navy, and they were only built a few years ago at a cost of £1 billion. They are some of the most expensive destroyers on this planet. However, for that significant price tag, you do actually get one of the most advanced destroyers in the world. Firstly, just take a look at the side of her, and you will notice how her superstructure is all carved into these funny angles. This is because she incorporates stealth technology. And a little bit like a stealth bomber, as radar waves go flying towards the side of these ships, they hit those angles and then get pinged off into lots of different directions, allowing her to appear virtually invisible when detected by an enemy's radar. Now, talking of radars, you can quite clearly see hers on board, the main one being the big grey ball on the top of the torch mast. That is called the Samson radar, and it is said to be one of the most sophisticated and powerful missile tracking systems in the world. Supposedly, from where the ship is sat today, you can monitor up to 200 miles away. That's from about here in Portsmouth to as far away as Paris. Within that range, you can monitor over 3,000 football-sized objects travelling at speeds of up to Mach 3, which of course is 3 times the speed of sound. They can then relay the information back to 3D, clever computers on board, which can then prioritise their targets. And should the threat then be detected, she can launch off her C-Viper missiles, which are inside the big grey box on the bow there. Another key weapon on board is of course the big grey cannon right on the front. That is called a Vickers Mark 8 4.5-inch naval sea gun. That one gun alone is in fact more powerful than the complete broadside of a World War II destroyer. To put that into modern day terms, it can launch off a 22-kilogram shell with pinpoint accuracy as far away as 14 miles. That's from about here in Portsmouth to as far away as approximately around about sort of Southampton distance. Turn of the Defender now. As we do so, you get to view her rather large flight deck at the after end here. One of the largest flight decks of any of our warships, obviously excluding the aircraft carriers. Now, in fact, it is so large, they can just about touch down the twin-bladed Chinook helicopter at the stern here. Now, that doesn't give a lot of room to play with. Generally speaking, they won't use one of those, but they can if they wanted to. So it gives them that sort of flexibility with the size of the stern there. You'll also be able to see inside a hangar bay at the moment, they're moving a lot of equipment into the Defender. That's because very soon she is due to leave Portsmouth and head down to the Gulf on deployment. So they're sort of preparing the ship to leave Portsmouth as well. Now ahead of us, and on our right, on the outer keyboards, we come up to the final warship in the naval base, and that's F-78 HMS Kent. She's one of 13 Duke-class Type 23 frigates. Now she was designed back in the late 1980s. Back then, what is known as ASW, which stands for Anti-Submarine Warfare. Basically, frigates are submarine hunters. They'll go off into hostile waters first, deploy that little yellow thing that's poking out the back of which is called a sonar radar, and then hopefully that way find the submarines. However, in the most recent of years, as our Royal Navy's got a lot smaller than what it once was, these frigates have had to find a way into other lines of work as well. So nowadays, they don't just go looking for submarines. In fact, they have proven to be very good multi-role vessels. The reason being is plain simply, they're really heavily armed. So unfortunately we can't really see it from where we are at the moment, but as we progress towards the bow of her, once the Commodore Goodwill swung round, you will be able to see most of her weapon systems on board. So right up in the front they've got the big grey cannon, a lot like what the Type 45s have. Remember that was called the Vickers Mark 8 4.5-inch naval sea gun. So that's got an accurate range of 14 miles. Then behind that is a box, 2 doors on the side, you might just be able to make out the 2 doors. That houses the Sea Wolf anti-aircraft missiles, which are a slightly older version of the Type 45's Sea Vipers. Unfortunately, nowhere near as capable, but can still hold their own by today's modern standards. She's also fitted with 4 anti-ship Harpoon missiles, a 30mm gun amidships, and below the waterline they carry Mark 11 depth charges as well as torpedoes. So all in all, they are very heavily armed. This cluster of 4 tubes you'll see just in front of the bridge there. If they have them in place, it means they are armed. If they're not there, it means they're disarmed. So because of that, we clearly know that she is fully armed, all weapons on board, and is ready to leave. So in the next week or so, she will be leaving us, unfortunately. Unfortunately, she does mark the end to today's active fleet. There are 2 more ships in the naval base. One on the other side of the keel, that's the former RFA Diligence, which was a forward repair ship. She would go along and repair any broken down warships. Unfortunately, she's no longer part of the Royal Navy. She's being taken out of service. She's being deemed in service to requirements. Then on the outer keywall, that is the SD Victoria. Now she isn't a warship. She's run by a company called Serco Marine Services, but it's used it's used as a worldwide support ship for our armed forces. Now she's used a lot by the SBS, the Special Boat Service, to transport their highly top secret launches. See three of them laid out on the back deck there at the moment, so they're very, very top secret. Anyway, swinging around, we now move away from the naval base as we now enter into the commercial part of the harbour. Coming into view on our right, you've got the brown and green coloured sheds of Portico, which is a container port here in Portsmouth. You can see one of our container ships currently alongside, offloading her various produce and goods into the sheds where it will be sorted, distributed to various places all around the UK. Next door to Portico is Portsmouth International Port, otherwise known as the Cross-Channel Ferry Port. This is the second busiest cross-channel ferry port in the UK, once again coming second to Dover. Now we've only got the one cross-channel ferry now alongside, the Commodore Goodwill just backing her way onto her berth. She'll be alongside for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then she'll be back underway and making her way across to the Channel Islands, so if you go to Jersey. So coming back into view on our right is the Royal Navy. So here is D-23 HMS Bristol. She was the only Bristol class destroyer to ever be built, and that's because back in the 60s, due to defence cuts, her three sister ships were all scrapped on paper. However, during her lifetime in the Royal Navy, she was the escort to the aircraft carriers during the Falklands, and she was also the Hong Kong guard ship for a number of years. Sadly though, she eventually found herself to be decommissioned, only though to be recommissioned a few years later as a static training ship, which she is today. Every year, thousands of sea cadets come down to this area of Portsmouth and will undergo various training exercises also on board. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to be making our way down towards the Gosport side of the harbour, so for this short part of the journey I will leave in peace from the commentary. However, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask any member of crew on board. If not, just sit back, relax, enjoy this little part of the trip. I'll be back to talk to you all very, very shortly. Slightly up behind us, you see there is this large grey structure with a crane on top of it. That is known as the UHAF, and it stands for the Upper Harbour Ammunition Facility. As at this point, warships come to get armed and disarmed. That'll be done over there, rather alongside the quay walls, for the plain and simple reason, if someone drops something, hopefully out there wouldn't do too much damage. Now the ordnance itself comes down from a place called Benenden, that's right at the far end of the harbour, amongst the bushes and trees. But it takes over the former site of Prince's Harbour, which is actually just here on our right with a cluster of red brick buildings. Back in its heyday, that was one of the largest sites in Europe. In fact, it was so large it had to be connected using a small train network. But eventually, housing grew in too close, and they deemed it just a little bit too unsafe to have so much ordnance stored so close to all the civilians. Therefore, they ended up moving up to where you find it today. Although a small area of the site still remains open, but this is now known as the Museum of Explosions. And it's here you can go and learn about the history of naval firepower. Anyway, sticking over on the right hand side of us, we've got this small island we're now going past with shrubbery on top. That there is called Burrow Island, although known locally as Rat Island. It gets that little nickname, so it had a very gruesome past. Now, Portsmouth, many years ago, it used to play home to thousands upon thousands of Napoleonic British War. They were kept in harbour on board what are called pump ships, basically run-down military vessels no longer seaworthy. Whilst on board, they were kept in some very cramped and very gruesome living conditions, barely given any food, water or medical attention. This meant it wasn't too uncommon for one or two of them to pass away at night. Now, rather than being left on board the ships, they would instead be rowed over to the island and dumped straight on top of it. given a burial, marker or grave, they were literally just left there to rot away. But eventually the island became infested with large black rats feasting upon these rotten corpses, and the locals feared the return of the Black Plague, so they ordered the Navy to clean up the mess. Eventually, the Navy did so. However, the only way they knew how to do it back then was to introduce the island to giant feral cats, and send the cats to try and scare the rats away. Unfortunately though, the cats were never seen again, and that's where the term rats as fat as cats is thought to have come from. So on that delightful note, enjoy your lunch. Anyway, now we're going to move over to our left-hand side. From where we're sat, we get a great view of Portsmouth's Millennium Project. Originally, that was going to be called the Millennium Tower, but sadly, due to various delays and setbacks, it wasn't actually complete until 2005. So, unable to call it the Millennium Tower, they had to rename it the Spinnaker Tower. This also meant the subsequent build costs soon grew from £6 to £9 million, all the way up to £36 million. But please don't worry, all is not lost, as on the grand day of opening, the Lord Mayor of Portsmouth decided that he would take the very first trip up the tower in a glass scenic elevator, which is located on the outside of one of those legs. He got roughly 2/3 of the way up in front of the world's media. He then got stuck. In fact, he had stayed there for nearly 2.5 hours until he'd be lowered down by the local fire brigade. The glass scenic elevator has never worked since. It's now been removed at a further cost of £2 million. You can still travel from the bottom to the top using a high-speed elevator located on the inside of one of those legs, and it takes just a matter of a few seconds to do so. The town today, though, of course, stands there at Gunwharf at a total height of 170 metres, making it the second tallest observation platform outside of London. But now on the right, we're just about to go past the town centre of Gosport, and despite being so close to Portsmouth, the two are obviously separated by the harbour. Therefore, if you wish to go from, say, Gosport on the right to Portsmouth on the left, you actually have to go through the market town of Ferrum, over the hills behind us, and eventually into the city of Portsmouth. During peak time traffic, this can take up to an hour in the car. So to avoid it, we have the green and white ferries. You'll see one either side of us. Known as Gosport ferries, they cut out that 17-mile round trip by road, so as they advertise, it is shorter by water. In fact, the ferries are proving to be so popular, these days they carry well over 3 million people between Portsmouth and Gosport every single year. Off to our right, this is the Harbour Entrance. This is the only way in and out of Portsmouth for pretty much everything you've seen today. As you look through all the way in the distance, you'll be able to see the shoreline to the Isle of Wight, and in particular the towns of Ryde, St Helens, Beveridge and Seaview. You'll also see between ourselves and the Isle of Wight 3 sea defence hulls. They were originally built by a guy called Lord Palmerston back in the Victorian era to defend Portsmouth from an impending French invasion. Thankfully, the invasion never came, and the forts have now been transformed into luxury hotels. So you can spend a night out at either Spitbank Fort or No Man's Fort. However, doing so will set you back at least £400 a night. It's not exactly cheap. Coming back inside the harbour entrance, we then come to an area known as Old Portsmouth, otherwise known as the Spice Island. Guess that term, this is where the first spices and potatoes were brought into the country by a guy called Sir Walter Raleigh. Ahead of us, that's Gunwharf Quays. Now, I know a few of you joined us at Gunwharf, and don't worry, we haven't forgotten about you. We're just going to return to the Historic Dockyard first before coming back to Gunwharf. So, if you did join us in, don't worry, we will be coming back here in a few moments' time. So as we go past Gunwharf Quays, obviously today it's a large shopping centre, but that wasn't always the case. This was in fact the former site of an area known as HMS Vernon. HMS Vernon was in fact a mine countermeasure base that used to do with torpedoes. That was all the way until the late 1980s, when it was then left dormant for a number of years, and eventually by the early 90s it was bought by a company called Barclay Homes, who transformed it into what you see today. Very selling to 90 shops, restaurants, bars, nightclub and casino, but of course the main attraction is the Spinnaker Tower. But I'm sure it's not the Spinnaker Tower that's grabbed your attention whilst we've been going along-side. It's of course this rather nice super yacht. Now this is Super Yacht Amaryllis. She is 80 metres long and worth a whopping £100 million. Now she was originally built back in 2011 alongside, I think it was 3 or 4 of her sister ships, and this one was built for an American billionaire called Richard DeVos. He owned the yacht all the way up until last year, and we then sold it to the former owner of the Bank of Moscow. It's the Russian gentleman who now owns it. This is now his pride and joy. He uses it on a relatively regular basis, but when he's not using it, it is available for charter. So if you wanted to, you can hire out for a week's holiday. If so, that will cost you just shy of £700,000 a week. And if you've got that sort of money to spend on a week's holiday, you probably already own a super yacht. Anyway, interviewing alright. This is now Portsmouth Harbour Station. This is where you can catch a train to various different destinations around the country. It's also where you can jump on a White Rider and travel across the Ride here on the Isle of Wight. James, I'm sure you're aware, but Warrior is actually licensed for civil ceremonies, which means yes, if you wish, you can get married inside the captain's cabin and stay here. Now, should you decide to do this, you can change the set of code flags that usually fly through the central rigging to spell out a message for the whole harbour to read. Therefore, in the past, we've seen things spelled out, such as good luck, congratulations, well done. But in the past, or a few weeks ago, we sort of don't do it. So, ladies and gentlemen, this does very nicely now bring us back into the historic dockyard, and it sadly brings an end to the tour today. Brings an end to our tours in general. Obviously, if anybody on board joining us at Gunwharf Quays and wants to go to Gunwharf, simply remain on board at this point. As soon as we've offloaded here, we will be whipping the gangway off and heading straight back round to Gunwharf Quays. If you want to go to Gunwharf, if you want to do some shopping, go for dinner or anything like that, remain on board. We'll take you back there in a few moments' time. So either way, it's going to be up to you. But we'd like to thank you all for joining us. We do hope you've all enjoyed yourselves. If you haven't, if you wish, a small little thank you can be left in the bucket as you leave from the boat. On behalf of myself and the crew, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your time here in Portsmouth. Thank you. Thank you, it's very kind of you. On that wonderful note, do you want me to leave you with my word of the day today? Since last door, my word of the day today has been onions. You may ask why onions? I'll tell you, because that's shallot.